Thanks, everyone. You know, this is so amazing that all of you are here because this is really the strength of Rochester. You know, all of you had so many options, especially on a horrible day like today. You could be home having a coffee or a glass of wine or having dinner. But instead, all of you are here not to listen to me, but collectively as a group, as a community, to think how to make Rochester better. There is nothing in it for anyone individually. No one is being paid to be here. We're not going to be giving away tickets to go to Jamaica. So it's really amazing. So you should be really proud of everyone that is sitting next to you, with you, on how to improve the community. And I'm just going to provide some ideas, and then we're going to have a dialogue. And of course, when people thought of the weather, people said, Gil, are you really going to go to Rochester? And talk about walking and cycling and parks and public spaces. They said, Rochester, impossible. It's too cold. You know, the weather is always an issue. So let me talk about weather first, because about this time of the year, I was working in the Caribbean, and last year, and they said, it's too hot, we cannot walk or bike. And I live in Canada, I got on the plane, I go back. So the weather is always an issue, but we should learn from the Scandinavians. They say, there is no such thing as bad weather. People come and people go. It's bad clothing. Obviously, this is not proper clothing for cycling in the snow. But if you got the right clothing, you just go. And it's fun, and it's exciting. But also it's about priorities. Here's when it snows, first they plow the sidewalk, then the bikeway, then the sidewalk, then the bikeway. The third time around, the sidewalk, the bikeway, and the street. It's about priorities. The most vulnerable people are the people walking, so the sidewalk should be top priority. And then the cyclists. I mean, when we have safe facilities, people walk, and people bike, and people use public transit. So, of course, I know that there is winter in Rochester. And I know that you have about 20 or 30 horrible days. Today and tomorrow are some of those 20 or 30 horrible days. Even the little girl knows it. And in addition to the 20 or 30 horrible, you got another 60 that are pretty cold. But you got over 200 that are nice. You know, and I know, for example, the snow in Rochester. Days with 1 inch or more are 28. Days with 2 or more are only 14. It's not 28 plus 14. They are inclusive. So it's only 14 days that you have snow more than 2 inches. More than 3, only 8 days. So the reality is that, you know, all of a sudden we think, and with more than 6 inches, just 3 days a year. So in many ways, winter is such a mental issue. Maybe because days like today are such an impact that then we tend to think that every single day for 3 months are like this. But no, it's not that bad. 3 days of the year, you get more than 6 inches. So the reality is that sometimes we are impacted so much that we focus our planning of the cities around those 20 horrible days. And then we mess up the 365 days of the year. Sometimes we do some horrible things, like some gigantic vacuums that suck the life out of the city. I live in Toronto, and in Toronto we have an underground path of about 8 miles. And this is what it looks like. And it's really horrible. I mean, here you see people 1 or 2 hours in the morning, 1 or 2 hours in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. No on Saturdays or Sundays or in the evenings or whatever. And these places, they don't integrate. They totally segregate. You know, it might be underground like that, or it might be above ground like Minneapolis, where the only life is the life they put in the signs of the buildings. And I know that you know what I'm talking about because you have some of those here. And here, they don't want any young people on skateboards. They don't want any low-income people. They don't want people on wheelchairs. They don't want handicaps. They don't want people if they don't have money. So they segregate. In Toronto, as soon as you end the underground path, along the underground, there is nothing. Blank walls, such as these walls, Sorry. But as soon as they end, then you got coffee shops and flower shops and fruits and vegetables and people and so on. So it is, of course, if we got bad weather, we gotta have better infrastructure. It's not about not having infrastructure. This is what a bus stop should look like. I mean, if we, instead of focusing on the 20 horrible, if we focus on the 200 nice days, then even those horrible are not gonna seem that bad. So, and we can totally do. And sometimes we can even bike. By the way, why is it that people are biking here? So many of them. One of the things is because it's safe. What do we mean that it's safe? Like, for the cars, it's at one level. And about 3 or 4 inches higher is for the bicycles. And another 3 or 4 inches higher is for the pedestrians. So there is a physical separation. You don't mix pedestrians and cyclists. You don't mix cyclists and cars. So it is totally safe. And then it becomes safe not only in the summertime, but also in the wintertime. And again, you plow the sidewalks, you plow the bikeways. We used to have in Toronto a mayor that used to say, traffic is horrible because of the cyclists. I think, traffic would be horrible if those cyclists were on cars. Imagine what the traffic jam could be like if all of those people. So winter, checked. I don't have to talk about winter the rest of the night. Because tonight what I want to talk about cities, and I want to talk about communities. And the cities, it doesn't matter if it's 100,000 people or cities of 1 million. The issues are very much the same. The solutions are different. In the city of 100,000, if you're under 16, you don't drive. If you are in a city of 1 million or 10 million, same thing. In the city of 100,000, we're living longer. In the city of 1 million or 10 million, we're living longer too. The solutions might be different. We need public transit in the city of 100,000, in the city of 1 million. So, and also the cities, we got to put all of this into a context. For example, we're having public health crisis, physical, mental, emotional. We got population changes. We got climate change. We see it everywhere. I mean, this temperature that we're having today is about climate change. Even though some people still don't want to believe in it. You know who I'm talking about. Eh? We're living longer. And not just in Rochester. All over the world, we're living longer. Look, this is amazing. This is the life expectancy. We've been around for 200,000 years. In 200,000 years, up till 200 years ago, 200 years ago, all of these are the countries in the world. We didn't have any country with a life expectancy above 45. Now, we don't have any country with a life expectancy below 45. Not even the poorest countries in Africa. Everybody. So we gotta create cities that are nice for older people. And when we're talking about cities, we talk about public spaces, we talk about sustainable mobility. I'm talking sustainable mobility, I'm talking about walking, cycling, using public transit, new uses of cars. And by the way, walking and cycling is not a joke. This could be any street in Rochester. In the summer, this could be anyone in the winter. Walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. By far, walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for people in Rochester. For all children and youth. If you are under 16, you might be the son or the daughter of the wealthiest person in New York. If you're under 16, walking and cycling is your own individual mode of mobility. So to be safe and enjoyable should be almost like a human right. Unless you think that only those that have the money and the age and the desire to have a car have a right to individual mobility. That's why we're also talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is really linked to everything. So all of this about how do we want Rochester to become? How do we want to live? So I want you to open up the minds about public spaces and streets. You know, if we look at Rochester from the air, 1/3 are streets. 1/3, between 30 and 40% are streets. And the streets are public space. They belong to all of us. and the parks. So let's think about public spaces and parks. This one, Detroit is going through revitalization. What are they doing? They are improving their public spaces. Malmo, they lost half of the jobs in 2 years because they were shipyard and they went to South Korea. And they had to reinvent. Part of it was through public spaces. Sometimes parks are in the middle of the city, like Piedmont in Atlanta. Sometimes are elevated, like Highline or the Bean. Sometimes are along the rivers. And what we do in the parks is amazing. All kinds of activities. I was working in Chicago during the last World Soccer Cup, and that's where I would go and see the games. And that's what they were doing in Korea and in Bogota and in Germany, everywhere. But it's not just about sports. Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, where do people go? They go to the public spaces. Or Occupy Wall Street, Jesuit Charlie in Paris, because the public spaces are great equalizers. Here no one cares who's rich or poor, fat, skinny, tall, everybody's equal. That's part of the beauty of the public spaces. But it's not just sports or politics. This is 2 million people in Rio. It wasn't during the World Cup. It was a few months before when the Pope came and gave a mass for 2 million people. It's incredible. But it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. You get a stair like this, and you paint it, and it transforms, like this guy in Rio that is making sure everyone is paying attention. Look at this from the point of view of engagement. Imagine you got 130 steps, and you got 130 small business. Each one paints a step and puts their initials, the sense of belonging. Or like this one, here in Rochester. Or a couple of weeks ago, I was in Minnesota and Alaska, where they do ice fishing. That's why I think that when people say, what's a good city? I said, a good city is one where I want to sleep at home, but I want to live outside. The public spaces. All of this, how do we want to live? If we want children to walk to school, then we need community schools. We need small schools where the catchment area is small. If we do some gigantic schools with gigantic areas, it's not going to work. So I want to take you through 8 messages. The first one, it's not about the money. When people say we don't have the money, that's an excuse. I was, before immigrating to Canada, I was commissioned in Bogota, and I learned. Now I advise many cities, but before I was doing, for example, we did over 200 parks in one term. All over the city, small ones, medium ones. We also designed hundreds of parks. After me, one of my brothers was mayor and did another 600. We did 800 parks in 2 terms. This was one of them. The Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then the Pope left, and nothing happened. There were not even sidewalks. Nothing happened for 27 years. Why? Because change is hard. Change is hard in Rochester, or in Bogota, or in Copenhagen, or in Tokyo, anywhere. You try to change in Rochester, and the cave people show up. You know them, the citizens against virtually everything. Sometimes I call them civic cadavers because you thought they were dead because they haven't done anything for the community. But you try to do, and they resuscitate. Not to support, but that's why you gotta be champions at finding solutions to the problems, not at finding problems to the solutions. You gotta find that little crack through the window and run through it and find a solution. It's not about having 20 excuses why things cannot be done. It's about getting things done. So it was like this for 27 years, and in 4 years we turned it into the nicest park. For active, for passive, for contemplative recreation, because it's not just about doing soccer fields, it's also about sitting and enjoying the weather, the roses, the birds, the people. Sometimes you gotta do aerobics with thousands. So it's about those uses and activities, and I'll talk a little bit more about all of that later on. But the uses and activities are critical. Some people were asking me, why are you doing hundreds of parks, especially in low-income areas, when the poor people have so many needs? I said, if you really care about low-income people, if you care about poor, when the poor people really feel miserable, it's in the leisure time. When people are working, the CEO of the bank or a minimum wage worker, they have similar experience. Maybe even the CEO has more anxiety and pressure. But in the leisure time, the CEO has restaurants and theater and country clubs and travels and cottages. The minimum wage worker doesn't. So if we improve how that person and his family or her family uses the leisure time, we're really improving quality of life. We also did ciclovia, that in America we call it open streets. I found a small program of a few miles and a few thousand people, and we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. Sunday mornings, we pop it up, and people come out. You should do it in Rochester. It's really simple. You open streets to people, you close them to cars, and the magic happens. Young, old, rich, poor. We do 75 miles every Sunday. 70, totally interconnected. Imagine the beauty, and connecting the wealthiest neighborhoods and the poorest neighborhoods, and you get all kinds of people. The mix is something that is totally amazing. But not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate, so along the roads we do aerobics, and we do Tai Chi, and we do cha-cha-cha. Anything but the common denominator is physical activity. And it's great. Most of the people actually go, 60% go is to ride bicycles. The other 40% walk and bike or run. Young, old, rich, poor, fat, skinny. You know, this is not like about doing marathons or anything like that. No, this is about anybody. 1 out of 4 people come out. 1 out of 4. It's something that is relevant. 1.7 million people. You know, the beauty of this is that it changes minds. All of a sudden we get that streets are public space. They belong to all of us. They can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. It's also about social integration, getting people of all ethnicities and incomes. And who would have thought? Cities like City of Angels and Cars, now they got their own ciclovia. Or Portland. I mean, what does Portland have that Rochester doesn't? Well, they got their open streets. Now you got to do your open streets and do it better. Now, India. And now we're doing over 100 cities in India. And if you don't want to do it, your decision makers, because it's Bogota or India, well, tell them if they're more snobby, tell them that Paris is doing it. And New York City. And many cities of 50,000, 100,000, cities of 10,000 people do it, cities of 20 million like Mexico City do it. It's also because we meet each other as equals. All of a sudden we find the wealthiest people in the city and the poorest, they're doing it. Second, let's create 80 cities. Now I run 2 organizations, 80 cities and world urban parks, and I tweet on messages on this, and I've been lucky to have worked in over 350 different cities. And I've seen a lot of different experiences. And World Urban Parks, basically, we want everybody to have quality urban parks to access. And we have members all over. It would be great to have Rochester as member. We have an academy through Indiana University, and we certify. We organize congresses. In Bogota, there's going to be one in June. There's going to be one in Denver in July with City Parks Alliance. And Denver has some really nice parks. We have advocacy committees. So if Rochester becomes members, you can have someone on children play or older adults or healthy parks. There are many committees. Or individually, if you want more information, help worldurbanparks.org. But everywhere I go, people ask, Gil, what's 880 cities? Well, 880 cities is not really about walking or cycling. It's not about parks or streets. Those are the means, not the end. The end is, how can we help create successful cities? You know, when I go to the places, I like to see the venue before I speak. I came early today to see this venue. I was going to speak in Warsaw outdoor in a plaza, and I went to see the night before, and I see all of these people dancing. And I say, oh, how am I going to compete the next day against people dancing? And then I saw the DJ Vika. She's a businesswoman. She owns all of the party, the speakers, the sets. She goes from park to park, from city to city. That's part of being successful. So it's successful cities and healthy communities where people are going to be happier. I know that happiness is hard to define. It's almost impossible to measure, but it's our goal in life. And people say, Gil, can my children walk to school? Can my grandparents ride their bike to get eggs or milk? Is this intersection safe? Well, you don't need to be a transportation engineer. 3 simple steps. We call it the 880 rule of common sense. Unfortunately, common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. Step number 1, think of a child that you love. Someone around 8 years old, your son, your daughter, your grandchild. Once you have that child in mind, step number 2, think of an 80-year-old that you love. Your parents, your grandparents, your brothers, your sisters. And when you have the child and the older adult, then step number 3, would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them riding their bike to get eggs or milk? Would they feel safe? Would they feel safe? What if everything that we did in Rochester, everything, the crosswalk, the sidewalk, the library, the factory, the restaurants, the business, everything had to be great for an 8 and an 80. Not 82, 88, and 80 as an indicator species. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody. From 0 to over 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. And build great cities for everyone. That is the concept of 880 cities. Third, let's move on sustainable mobility. Sustainable mobility is walking and riding bicycles and new uses and public transit and new uses of cars. By the way, who came walking today? In such a horrible day. Well, I don't see any cars in this room. I don't see any bikes. Everybody came walking. Every single trip begins and ends by walking. We walk to the car. We walk to public transit. We walk to places. Everybody walks. Everybody's pedestrian. You know, the other day, 2 days ago, I went to Google and I put walking. And I see all of this. This is kind of crazy. This is not really all walking. You know, these people as if you got to dress up to go walk. You know, you got to put your Lululemon to go walking. No, everybody walks every day at any. That's how we were created. You know, just like the birds, they fly, or the fish swims, the deer, they run. People, we walk. We walk. Even in the 20 horrible days with our babies, we walk. And when we walk, we use all our senses. Maybe that's what makes us so happy. We see the children playing or going to school. We hear the birds singing. We're going from a bakery or a coffee shop. We smell the aroma. Moms and babies and older adults walk. We walk in the summer. We walk in the winter. We walk all the time, but we're going to make it safe. And it's not safe the way we're doing our cities. Yesterday, people driving cars killed 741. In the U.S., in the last 10 years, over 50,000 people have been killed by people driving. This around the world is more than a person every 2 minutes. They are not accidents. Accidents is when they could not be avoided. They can be avoided. They are incidents. Many cities are adopting Vision Zero. Vision Zero is saying people are not perfect, so we need to build their streets so that no one will be killed, no one will be injured. But you gotta put money and you gotta put actions, because some cities adopt Vision Zero, but they don't put the money or the actions, and they become zero vision. For example, Seattle last year, they lowered the speed to 20 miles an hour on 2,600 miles of roads. Why? Because Seattle want to be safe. I mean, what does Seattle have that Rochester doesn't? You can be as good or better. I mean, one of the things that I think that happens in Rochester, you need to be ambitious. You need to say, okay, what do we want to be? You know, the city of Vancouver, I've worked there many times, they said, we want to be the most sustainable. But not in Canada, not in North America, in the world. So what does Rochester want to be? You know, if we're going to improve walking, we need to make it a priority. It's not a priority when we do this. Or when we allow cars to be on the sidewalks, or when we don't even do sidewalks. It's horrible. We're telling this woman every single day, you are a second-class citizen. You know, the sidewalks need to be a priority. Unfortunately, you know, I went running yesterday, and while I was running, honestly, I had to run on the streets all the time, because this is how the sidewalks in Rochester are. I understood why this guy is walking in the middle of the street, because the sidewalks are not really in condition for anyone to be walking. They're extremely dangerous. They need to be a priority. The sidewalks, there is nothing as important in a city as the sidewalk, nothing. I mean, on the streets, when we're cycling or on transit or on cars, we're going from point A to point B. Not on the sidewalks. On the sidewalks, we meet boyfriends and girlfriends. On the sidewalk, we meet our neighbors, the person selling flowers and fruits, and we enjoy the city. We go to any city, first thing we do is go out and walk on the sidewalks. We use them in the summer, we use them in the winter. In the sidewalk, the children catch Pokemons. We catch transit. The sidewalks are the life of the city. Nothing as important in the city as the sidewalk. The sidewalk reminds us that walking is much more than walking. We go out for a coffee and we take 1 or 2 hours. We walk, we sit, we watch, we walk again. A few weeks ago, I was working in Buenos Aires on the sidewalks. I saw people dancing tango. The sidewalks are much more like part of the family of the parks than the streets. Maybe the sidewalk should be run by Parks and Recs and not by Public Works. You know, if we're going to improve walkability, we got to lower the speed, like Seattle did and many cities are doing. All the residential streets, when you are on an arterial, it might be 40, 50. As soon as you turn into a residential, it should be 20 miles an hour. Not because 20 is plenty, sounds nice, but because if a car hits you at 20 miles an hour, there is 5% probability of being killed. At 40, it's more than 80. And there are many, many studies that show. These are not technical. If we do a small island, we eliminate half of the incidents in the crosswalks. Why are we still doing crosswalk without an island? When we know that the island is going to save lives. The children going to field trip, they don't cross in one line, they can stop, and they continue. And people say, oh, people are being hit is because they're texting. No. People of all ages, older adults are the ones that are being killed the most. In the US, twice as many older adults are killed in intersections as the proportion of the population. We can and should make it safe. Sustainable mobility, obviously, not just walking, it's also riding bicycles, new uses of cars. I'm not saying that this is the end of the car industry. But the way we use cars is changing very, very fast. You know, in the US, in the last 4 years, the young people, 16 to 24, purchase fewer cars than in the last 40. That's great, how the young people are transforming. For the young people now, the car is no longer a status symbol. It's almost more of a status symbol not to have a car. Pay higher rent and live in a walkable neighborhood than pay a lower and live way out where you need a car. And there are many new uses. People say, oh, driverless cars, everything is going to be solved. And people do see these nice drawings. They say, oh, with driverless cars, we're not going to have traffic jams. As if the traffic jam was the driver. It's the car. If we don't change our behavior, if we don't change how we build our cities, we're going to have the same traffic jams or worse in driverless cars. I mean, we may have less cars parked because there might be more car sharing, but there might be many, many more cars on the road. So it can be nice or it can be horrible. It's up to all of us. How do we decide? And of course, also riding bicycles. You can imagine in Rochester going to school in the summer. I mean, Rochester, you can be as good as any city that you want. Why not? You can be as good as Copenhagen on any topic. By the way, Copenhagen, people bike everywhere. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer. It rains all year round. It's horrible, the rain. But they bike all the time. You know, when I took this photo, like 10,900 cyclists had gone by. This goes to zero every day at midnight. 41 out of 100 people use their bike to go to work, to go to school. And they're not saying 41, and here it's about 1 or 2 out of 100. So, and it's not because they are poor. They have a higher per capita income than any city in the US. But they're not saying 41 is enough. They want to go to 50%. And men don't need shirts in the summer. Or women, special shoes. And some people say, oh, but Copenhagen, they are bigger. By the way, Copenhagen is not much bigger. The municipality itself. But let's see a city, a small city of 200,000 people. They did a study of mobility, walking, cycling, cars, everything. They thought of the winter, they thought of the summer, people going to work, people going to school. Lots of communication with the citizens, lots. And then they started working. Any street with more than 5,000 cars, they have a separate facility. One level for cars, then higher for bikes, or this other type. You know, this could be like Rochester, anywhere. putting counters all over. At midnight goes to 0, then put in air all over the place, so you can put air on the bikes, simple notices, electronic, you click here, I want coffee place, and then it shows the spot. The spot, I went to the spot, it's a really nice place here in Rochester. You got lockers, and you got public washrooms, even underground bike parking in a community of 200,000 people. It's about changing the mentality. It's about having facilities that are nice in the summer and in the winter, in the snow, in the rain. And they have some pedestrian streets. And pedestrians are first. So if you're on your bike, either you leave your bike out or you walk your bike. But pedestrians have to be top priority. And when they are coming near the schools, the cars are not at 20 miles an hour. The cars are at 0 miles an hour. Because in front of the schools, from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., there are no cars. And that's a new trend all over the world. You should try it in Rochester. If you don't want to try it in all the schools, try it in one, and then another, and another, and another, and people are going to adopt it. People are going to love it. Because it's becoming very dangerous to go to the schools because the parents are late to work, and they are driving like crazy. No, in front of the school, there should not be any cars. And they put all of these games, so then the kids want to arrive early. We gotta keep in mind that it's about a city for everyone. The quality of the infrastructure is a symbol of the respect that we have for people. And if we're going to improve bikeability, please, it's not about doing these things. I was working in Florida a few months ago, and I went and the Florida the Department of Transportation was showing me 50 miles an hour, and they paint a line. Who's gonna bike there? Nobody. The few that bike get killed. Unfortunately, Florida has the highest cyclists and the highest pedestrians killed in the US. But it's because they're doing these kind of things. 55 miles an hour. Look at these gigantic roads. They got plenty of space to do protected bikeways. I mean, whenever you do anything in Rochester, anything, including about cycling, we got to think of the children. We need to think of the immigrants. We need to think of the older adults. In reality, if it's not safe for an 80-year-old and it's not safe for an 80-year-old, it's nothing. It's nothing. Don't call it a bikeway. It's just paint on the pavement. If we want people to bike in Rochester, there are only two ways. We must lower the speed in the neighborhoods, because if in neighborhood streets, the streets are slow, then you can mix. And we need to create a network. So everything I said about 20 miles for walking is the same for cycling. But we need a minimum grid of AAA bikeways. What's AAA? It's all ages and abilities. It's not for the 20 to 50 in spandex. It's for everybody. And nothing as important as connectivity. Someone told me today, but now we got a protected bikeway in Rochester. Unfortunately, you need a network. Because if now you got 30% of your rides safe, but the other 70% is not, people are not going to bike. So we got to think of daytime and nighttime and winter and summer. And if you don't want to do it protected like this one in Paris, okay, paint a line. But don't just paint a line. Enhance the painted line with some plastic bollards, and it's going to create a world of difference. That's why people bike in Copenhagen, because they're protected byways. There's connectivity. So, and we're going to improve public transit. One of my brothers is mayor of Bogota, so 2 years ago, he said the civilized city is not the one where the poor have cars. It's the one where the rich use public transit. We need to build in Rochester public transit for everybody. We need the buses and the trams. And part of it is infrastructure, but it's marketing. I was working with a mayor in a city, and he told me, the citizens didn't like these regular buses. So he got his buses, he put a nose, he covered the wheels, and now they look like trains. Maybe people will ride more buses in Rochester if they look like that. Let's don't do horrible things like this to cover the windows. This is unsafe. And it's not dignified. I mean, we don't do this in the private cars. Why do we think that people taking public transit want to do it? I mean, sell advertisement, but don't cover the windows. Especially don't cover selling cars. Because then it becomes very painful. And you've seen this around here. Sometimes people say, but where are we going to put public transit? Well, do the mobility math. Do you want to have one of these or 140 of those? I mean, what makes public transit go fast is not if it has rubber wheels or metal wheels, it's if it has dedicated lanes or not. I mean, this is about democracy. The first line in the US Constitution says all people are equal. If all people are equal, then 80 people on a bus or 140 people in that bus have the right of space of 140 cars with one person. We should not be on a bus, on a traffic jam behind cars with one person. That's not democracy. Do we want one of those or 145 of this? We know that walking and cycling and transit takes up a lot less space than cars. We need to change. The other day, a mayor told me that he bought some buses and people were going to take him. I said, you think anybody's going to get out of their car when this is what the bus stop looks like? This is a high school for 1,500 students, and that's the bus stop. So I decided to show that mayor another bus stop. He said, Gil, why are you showing me this bus stop? I said, maybe that's what the bus stop will look like if the decision makers use the bus service. We gotta have parks with uses and activities. Let me show you some symptoms so that tomorrow when you go to the public places, you see if the public place is working fine. One symptom is good places to sit. This guy needed 5 chairs to be happy. His feet, his big. You put a bench, he would not have been as happy on a bench. Sometimes we see, monkey does. Sometimes people see, people do. We do sidewalks, and we don't put benches on the sidewalks. The other day, I was working in a city in Kentucky, and I walked with the mayor 8 or 9 blocks, and I said, Mayor, I don't see any benches. And he said, Gil, it's the homeless. I said, the homeless? What do you think? Do you think this is magic? We take out a bench, and a home appears? I said, you are not only hurting the homeless, you're hurting the older adults. Older adults will not walk if there are no benches along the way. Actually, so we even put nails so people won't even sit. This guy was so tired and no benches, he had to sit on his briefcase while his friend actually fainted. And his wife is sitting on their baby. But when you got nice places to sit, it's kind of magical. Even in the middle of the winter, this woman sits and reads. You know, in movable chairs, people don't even sit facing each other. They sit facing others. Starts to rain and won't even move. You know, last year I was working in Istanbul. I see these 2 people sitting on bollards, which is ironic when they got like 20 chairs in this building. Another symptom, sociability. If you see people talking to each other, it's a good symptom. Another one is diversity. We see children, we see youth, we see older adults, we see handicap. Another symptom, affection. We're affectionately, we feel at ease. Another symptom, high proportion of women. Women are more selective. If the place is not clean and nice and feel safe. But these are symptoms. Let me go through some characteristics of good parks. One, I think the biggest problem we have in America is management. Bad management of parks. We tend to think that management is synonymous of maintenance. Picking up the garbage and cutting the grass. No, maintenance might be 20% of management. Management is much more. Of course, we need to have maintenance, but we need to have grandparents and grandchildren doing bread. We need uses and activities. We need to have people walking and cycling and playing chess and having lunch. We need to have volunteers, but having the tools for the volunteers. We need to have citizen engagement. Ask the citizens before, during, and after what is it that they want in the parks. We need to have the resources, human, financial, physical. It's about equitable access in the city, the rich neighborhoods, the poor neighborhoods, everywhere. It's about safety. But safety don't do like I saw in London the other day, they said, beware, thieves are in the area. This is like an open invitation to the thieves of the city. This must be a good market. You need a lot of police when the parks are empty. You don't need when they are full. So what is the cheapest way to have safety in parks? Uses and activities. Sometimes I go to the cities and it seems like it was easier to find the millions to do the parks than to find the thousands to make it work. You say, oh, let's do moving in the park. We don't have money. Let's do knitting in the park. We don't have money. They don't have money for any activity. Let's keep in mind that if our parks don't have people, if they're empty, they got very few benefits. So we need to have those uses and activities. Sometimes it's just doing laughing yoga. This is a round point in the summertime. It's a nice skating ring in the winter. And part of the winter, you do the skating ring, and if you put lights, it's even better. If you have hot chocolate and music, and all of a sudden you got more and more and more, it becomes a great place. It's about having yoga. It's about having different types of music. You know, the fastest growing activity in the parks is knitting. People could be knitting at home, but they like to knit in groups. It's because of loneliness, sociability. That's why also we gotta have music and activities. We gotta have Wi-Fi so we'll get all the young people out of their houses into the parks. Reading, so we get older adults volunteering to read books to children. You know, it's not about money. The uses and the activities don't really cost a lot of money. And we gotta think of the winter, of course, and the summer. You might wanna get married in the summer. Some people might wanna get married in the winter. And remember, when I talk about the winter, also, in regards to parks, it's the same. We need to invest. Sometimes cities invest all of the money in parks in July and August. No, don't invest in July and August. People are going to go to the parks anyway. And the private sector and everybody's putting money in the summer. Let's extend that summer throughout the year so that we will have really nice, fun activities in the winter. It doesn't have to be a gigantic skateboard, but we have a small skateboard, and then it's kind of magical. It's nice and it's fun. Let's open our streets so that we have some street hockey. Let's organize yoga and aerobics. Let's, in the summer when the days are dark, let's put lots of lights. Don't even call them Christmas lights. Let's call them winter lights. So that we will have them on after Halloween, we will have at the beginning of November, and don't take them out till March. So the light help us be happier and the lights totally transform our mood. And should we have in Rochester small parks or large parks? Well, you gotta have both because they satisfy very different needs. In the small neighborhood park, that's where we develop a sense of belonging. We meet our neighbors, we develop solidarity. So the neighborhood parks are very important. Everybody should have a park within walking distance, but we're not gonna be able to play tennis or soccer, so we need to have medium-sized parks. And we're not going to be able to go canoeing, so we need to have large parks. So at the end of the day, we need medium, we need large, we need small, we need all sizes. Active recreation, passive and contemplative. We've done with ARP a really nice manual on creating parks and a guide. That's free, you can download it. People say, what's a good city or a good community? It's like a good park. Totally integrated with nature and especially safe, especially for children, for women, for older adults. Let's not copy, but yes, sometimes people say, oh, but we are not Copenhagen, or we're not Seattle. It doesn't matter. This is not like on the computer that we copy and paste. No, but we can adapt, we can improve. A beauty in the public sector is that for us to get better, someone doesn't have to get worse. In the private sector, if I got 20% of the market of clickers, and I want to go to 21%, for me to get 1% more, someone has to have 1% less. Not in the public sector. If you go and see a really nice ice skating, and you do one similar, the other one doesn't have to be any worse for you to be any better. So we can really learn from others. We can adapt. Everybody can learn. For example, a friend, a physical education teacher of an elementary, she saw that this year fewer and fewer kids were walking to school. So she asked the students, why don't you walk to school? Because they were afraid of the cars. So when the kids go home over holidays, they come back, and she's dressed up as a pylon. She shut down the parking lot. And she thought the parents were so upset, she thought they were going to beat her up. And they came and said, good morning. The kids loved her. And on a day like today, minus 24 degrees Fahrenheit, and the kids were walking, and the kids were cycling. So we need hundreds of Ann Fentons. Because part of it is hardware, but part of it is software. Part of it are programs. People say cities don't change. Oh, in Rochester, what like that? No, cities do change. Melbourne used to be horrible. Even they made fun of themselves. They said, oh, an empty, useless city. Now Melbourne is one of the top 5 cities in the world, almost on everything. What have they done? They put art. And you have art here also. But art for people at 3 miles an hour. Not art for cars at 60 miles an hour. They planted trees. Most of these trees, they didn't have any trees. They plant trees and it totally transformed. The trees are good for everything, health, environment, for business. They improve their public transit. Some of the streets, they even put just public transit and walking. And they were doing so many different activities. They had all of these laneways that were dark and smelly, and now they got businesses. How did they do? They said, we want to activate the center. So the public and private sector working together. The government said, oh, you got a restaurant, why don't you set it up here? But it's a laneway. We'll give you the seed money. So the government gave them $50,000, the seed money. And then they started doing art and restaurants and flower shops. It wasn't just one or two. Now they got 84 of these all over the city. They had a river like here, a river going right through the middle of Melbourne, in the Yarra River. Only factories, because in most places, 100 years ago, it was all the factories were next to the rivers because they were throwing all the garbage into the river. Now the rivers are revitalized. Look, instead of factories, now they got beautiful linear parks. The power of your river going through the middle of Rochester could be fantastic. Investing in beautiful bridges. It could be really amazing. It could be, no one wanted to live downtown Melbourne. Now everybody wants to live downtown Melbourne. They don't need a car. Everything is walkable. There's life. There's activity. There are so many roads that were for cars that now are being parked for people. And you are doing some of those right here, which is like, here there used to be a river like 40 years ago. But 40 years ago, people were thinking efficiency. So they built a road on top of that. And they said, can we go to Rochester and get the best people to come here? Probably not. This is important because for some people, some of your decision makers care about money. Well, we live in an ever more globalized world. And in a globalized world, the best people can live anywhere. However you define best, can be the best medical doctors or engineers or pizza makers or community organizers. If I'm a good carpenter, I can live anywhere. So where am I going to live? Wherever me and my family have the best quality of life. So every morning you should be waking up, the leaders on the private, in the NGOs, in the public sector, in Rochester, thinking, how can we retain our best people? How can we attract? Quality of life has become the most important tool of economic competitiveness. So someone said, wasn't there a river going down? And 7 years ago, they brought it out. Same store, same street. They brought it. So you want to live on that one or on this one? Here, 6 lanes for cars. They took the 4 lanes in the middle out. For 1.5 miles, they created a linear park. Imagine all of these thousands of condos if they got 6 lanes of cars or if they got a beautiful linear park and only 1 lane on each side. That is the idea. And they didn't make all of it. No, part of it was designed by that. I'm sorry that almost all of the land that you are getting from the highway is being built up. I wish half of it would have been for parks because it could have been something like this. And the other half for housing. In Seoul, South Korea, they had a river going right through the middle, and they built on top of the river 5 lanes for cars, and it got full. So what did they do? They put a second floor, and it got full. So they said, we need a 3rd floor. This is 8 miles through the heart of Seoul. And the mayor said, there is no city in the world that has some mobility through their private car. None. And everyone has tried in the last 80 years. So he didn't build the 3rd floor. He tore down the 2nd, the 1st, and he brought out the river. And he put public transit. And of course, it was complicated. Not everybody was on board. It was very controversial. People were saying, Mayor, are you crazy? People are not going to stop for coffee. As if going at 60 miles an hour, people were going to stop for coffee. Now they stop for coffee because there is only 1 or 2 lanes slow on each side, and there's a linear park of 8 miles through the heart of Seoul. That is the power. I saw here in Rochester this, and I was thinking of something that happened in Toronto last year. Under a highway, horrible, the Bentway, a beautiful park was born with a little bit of money, some private, some public, but the Bentway came alive. So sex is it's about the benefits. It's not about mobility or parks. It's about a Rochester for everyone, for all people. And these are some of the benefits. All of this is good for education, and for culture, for environment, for transport. So you to each of the councilors, each decision maker, or the citizens, bring different because it has benefits to all. Let me give you just one example. Health and well-being. Well-being is being well. Health. Let's remember that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not just being sick. Is this what the future looks like? The issue of obesity is that it has to do with heart attacks and respiratory problems and anxiety and cancer. These are the 35 wealthiest countries in the world, and the U.S. is last. The U.S. is the wealthiest country. You know, people say, oh, it's always been like this. No, it has not always been like this. 20 years ago, there was not a single state with more than 20%. Today, there is not a single state with less than 20%. In New York, it used to be only 9%. Now it's almost 26%. And it's above all ages. It's white, it's black, it's Latino. We went from 1 in 10 to 1 in 4. It doesn't make sense. You might say, okay, that might be in New York, but in Rochester, we're going to be different. We're going to be healthy. We're going to do something massive. We're going to improve the school lunches. We're going to have farmer market all over this in every single neighborhood. We're going to have urban gardening, so the children will know that the tomatoes don't come out of a factory, but they are grown. And also, we need to be active. And I mean, physical activity is good almost for everything. For heart disease, for diabetes, for overweight, for almost, and it's not about doing marathons. Children, 60 minutes a day. Adults, just 30 minutes. 30 minutes is almost nothing. So there is an urgency of physical activity. Sometimes people keep asking, what is the magic pill? And people keep, if you want a magic pill, there is no such thing as a magic pill. The only way that Rochester is going to be physically active, and that is the magic pill, physical activity. The only way is if people are going to walk or bike as a normal part of everyday life. There is no other way. No, there is no city in the world that has large portions of the people active other than walking or cycling as a normal part of everyday life. That's why it's so important to have the sidewalks and to plow the sidewalks and to have the crosswalks and to have the children walking to school or biking to school. Or that's why it's so important to have the network protected byways, because that's the only way. But also, we need to realize that even sustainable mobility or parks are good for physical health, but there is no health without mental health. So it's not just because all of this is going to be good for physical health. Also mental loneliness. People are very lonely. So much that in the UK last year, they created the Ministry of Loneliness. Loneliness increases by almost 30% the possibility of heart disease, of strokes, twice the possibility of dementia. People are lonely all over, people of all ages, especially older adults. So that's why I'm saying that we're going to have the walking groups, we're going to have the knitting groups. Depression is the leading cause of disability. If we got contact with nature, it's going to improve our mood, our attention. So we're going to have nature everywhere. And if we got neighborhoods that are green, it lowers the depression, the anxiety, the stress. So we gotta have everywhere. We need the nature where we go shopping. We need it in our houses. We need it in our schools. We need it in our places of work. And we don't need just to have parks open in the summer or in the fall. Same park in the winter. We gotta be able to go to the park anytime. We gotta have nature everywhere. 7, I want everybody to live tonight being a guardian angel. A guardian angel of the gentle majority. Gentle is because they are not the squeaky wheels. You know, I'm talking about the children, the older adults, the poor. Anything we do in Rochester, we should always think, how does this affect any community? We should evaluate communities, but how do we treat the most vulnerable? The most vulnerable are these, the children, the older adult, and the poor. Let me give you an example of each one. Children. Let's imagine that Rochester, we had playability everywhere. I was so happy to see this the other day when I went around and said, play on its way. That's fantastic. You might be, just like Vancouver is going to be the most sustainable in the world, you might be the most playable city. And that might be an umbrella guide. It could be so, and I mean, you got the National Museum of Play. Actually, I didn't really know what I saw this building, and I saw the Strong. I said, what is this, the Strong? And then I came closer and said, oh, it's about play. And then I said, you know, this is kind of counterproductive because we want everybody to play, not just the strong people. So then, I went back to the hotel and I Googled and I said strong, and they said, oh, it's the family strong. The strong, you know, but this would be even nicer if you said the play really big. And then below said, sponsored by the Strong family. So all of us would be very grateful because we would know that it's a strong family. But, it would be really, but that imagine the playability in Rochester that you go to the sidewalks and you find swings. And you are waiting for the bus and there's a small parkade next to the bus stops. And you are catching the bus and there are many ways. It's not about the money. This doesn't cost a lot of money. It's about just allowing people to be colorful and playful and fun and exciting. Imagine our sidewalks in Rochester painted like this, or children and adults and everybody jumping rope. You see it in their body language, how happy they are. And people are going to say, oh, great, because it's so fun. But it's not only fun. Playing is how children learn. Playing is how children learn. Playing is how children develop their muscle strength, their sociability, their language, their friendship, their coordination, almost everything they need in life, their sense of belonging. They know how to make friends. We got to have playability everywhere in Rochester. We got to have possibilities where children play with others, they play with their dogs. These are going to be the future city builders. Everywhere in Rochester, we should have a park within a short walk. Every kid. And it's doable, but in the next 4 years, not in the next 40. So let's start doing parks everywhere. And if we don't have a park, let's think of things that are public. The school, the library, the street, the sidewalk. Your friends from the South in New York City, they thought everybody had a park within walking distance. They did a map and many did not. So they went to the schools and they said, you got this horrible playground? We'll do a real playground if and only if you make it a school park. That after 4 p.m., Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, we open it to the community. And they did look at all of these green roofs and trees. Why so much green? Because the children had less attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. But New York City hasn't done 1 or 2 with the Trust for Public Land. They have done 224. They have increased by more than a quarter the playgrounds of the city without buying 1 inch of land. We gotta make everything. We gotta have school parks, library parks, sidewalk parks. And if we don't have a school, let's take over a street and make it a play street. All of this is doable, but we need to make it a priority. The schools need to be kind of hubs. And I say children, older adults, and poor, the older adults. Like Bernard Shaw said, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So if Rochester is the most playable city in the world, it's about everybody playing. Everybody. We're living longer. Not long, much, much, much longer. The people that have ever lived to 65 in the history of humanity, half are alive today. Half. 100, this is the US, 100 years ago, there were very few people over 65. How is it growing? And it's going to continue to go. We're going to double the population over 65. We're going to quadruple the population over 80. And people are having fun and are excited and not even thinking about retirement. I'm thinking about retirement from the point of view of being re-engaged. We should create a movement that's 60 plus alive. Because the biggest waste of resource in the US is called older adults. People retire and we cross them out as if they had died. Except that they got 20, 30, 40 years left. And they have knowledge and experience. And they're healthier and wealthier. They could be teaching English to immigrants. They could be tutoring kids in the schools. They could be organizing walking groups, knitting groups. Our universities should be having 20, 30% of the courses should be for older adults, because older adults are hungry but of knowledge. They want to learn about painting, and they want to learn music and gardening and history and sociology, about everything. It's really fantastic, the possibilities. In the US, think about it, we have doubled the life expectancy in the last 200 years. We have learned how to survive, but with all of these issues that we have, we need to learn how to live. And learning how to live is what all of us are doing collectively, because learning how to live, a big part of it is about the built environment. How do we build our cities? For example, for older adults, we need benches, we need walking paths. But of course, we also know that we need game tables and restaurants, drinking fountains. So we know what needs. It's not about taking the benches out, but putting more benches in. Remember when we were talking about parks and the uses? Older adults need uses and activities. We did a study with the Rand Corporation. The segment of the population that uses parks the least in the US are the older adults. By far, is the least used because there is nothing to do. There are no benches, there are no walking paths. And it's not expensive to do. It's the highest cost benefit of any infrastructure in a park is the walking path. Let's do walking paths everywhere. This is around a library when I was in Singapore. This is in Moscow. Everywhere we gotta do. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. It might be a small park. Do the small loop and people are gonna be walking. And older adults, of course, like to walk, but they gotta like to do other things. Tai Chi, yoga, dancing, reading, watching people. They're watching. So the activities are critical. And then also let's develop this sense of intergenerational. Let's promote. Every playground should have a nice, cozy place for parents and grandparents. Because then imagine the magic. Now I'm a grandfather, like 4 months ago, and then I dream of going with my grandkid to the park. But then if the grandparents go to the park and there's not a place to sit, in 5 minutes they get bored and they want to go home. So just as important as the swing or the slide is a nice cozy area for parents and grandparents to have a coffee, to read a book, to watch the children. That magic of multi-generational has to be promoted and enhanced. And then the poor. This is a huge issue. I'm not talking about equality, I'm talking about equity. Someone did these cartoons that explain this is equality. No, some people are starting so far behind that some might need 2 and 3 boxes. Others don't need any box. And someone said, oh, that's equality, that's equity. Then maybe this is reality. But maybe here in Rochester, you think outside the box. It's not about moving boxes, it's about tearing down walls. And we're not doing well. You know, in the US, the wealthiest country in the world, we got over 13 million children living in poverty. Of the population living in poverty, in the US, 1 out of 5 children live in poverty. In South Korea, it's 1 out of 15. In Denmark, it's 1 out of 37. In Rochester, it's 1 out of 2. 1 out of 2. These are numbers from the city. The poverty rate is 33%. The children poverty rate is 51%. This means that we need to do even more in the public space. We need better sidewalks. We need better parks. We need more activities. From the point of view of mobility, the people that have a car, they're spending 20% of their income. And if they're low income, might be 25, 30% of the income on mobility. They could be spending 4% if people walk or bike or to public transit. Even the houses that we build houses and 1/3 of the house is for the car, the driveway, the garage. There is nothing that would improve people's finance more than allowing people to downsize from 2 cars to 1. Or from 1 to 0. And great for the local economy, because instead of this money being spent on cars built in China or Mexico, they're going to be spent in the restaurants, in the coffee shops. You know, this doesn't make any sense that we can live in one part of the city and our life expectancy is 64 and 10 minutes away is 90. And it's not because it's Cleveland, you go to Washington, you go to New Orleans, probably you go to Rochester and it's similar. Some parts of the city might have 5 times more parks than others. So we need to change. And that's the last message. Change, we don't change because it's hard. Doing more of the same is easy. But we need everywhere. You know, Copenhagen didn't have any pedestrian streets because the cars were taking over in the 50s, 60s, 70s. They were going to create the first pedestrian. I said, what, pedestrian for walking? Like, we got too many cars. We love our cars. And the weather is horrible. But the number one reason why they didn't want pedestrian, they said, oh, it's not part of our culture. Pedestrian streets, that's for the Italians. Because the Italians are loud and noisy and they love the streets, but we are Danish and the Danish are cold and quiet. Quiet? Now those Danish are more Italian than the Italians. They love their pedestrian streets in the middle of the rain. This is City Hall in Copenhagen. They went from 18 of these car places became people places. And even in the middle of the winter, people are enjoying it. So when you're going to change in Rochester, 3 recommendations. First, change is not unanimous. So when people say, oh, not everyone is on board, never. People will, change is so hard, it will never everybody be on board. So honestly listen to everybody, but then you have to make a decision. Second, the general interest must prevail over the particular. So if you go and you say, we're going to widen the sidewalk, and someone says, oh, but my pizza place. No, don't tell me about your pizza place. Tell me the same argument, but frame it around the general interest. And third is when you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something else. So you say, oh, we don't want this park. Okay, that's fine. You don't want the park. That means that you want more obesity, more depression, more anxiety. Everything has consequences. So we need to change. All of these things we've been talking tonight, they are not technical issues. They are not financial. They are political. From the point of view, it's not political party. It's more about policy. With a big P, everybody needs to participate. All of us. This is not a time for citizens to be spectators. We got to move from talking to doing. All of us, we need to build broad alliances. An alliance is like a 3-legged stool. One of the legs are the elected officials at all levels, city, state, federal. Another leg is the public sector. But not just the urban planners. We got to have public health and education and environment and engineering and the community. We need to have the activists and the universities and the media and everything. How to get the three legs working together? What is the glue? Well, the glue is developing a sense of urgency. Whatever is the sense of urgency in Rochester, each city has different sense of urgencies. And once you have the sense of urgency, then you can have a shared vision and action. You know, some cities have vision, but they don't action. They know what needs to be done, but they don't do it. They become frustrated. Other cities, the other way around, they action, but they have no vision. They are always doing things, but there is no vision. But if you have action and you have vision, you're going to be able to create a vibrant and healthy Rochester for everyone. And you are moving from talking to doing. I know you are doing, I've seen, but you got to do more, and you got to do it faster. So Rochester, let's do it now. Thank you.